Hello, wonderful. It is Sarah, and I'm here with Avery Neal, who is a psychotherapist and author on the subject of emotional abuse, toxic relationships, all the crazy stuff we're talking about all the time. Avery, how are you?
Hey, fine. Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
Okay, I know you've written several things and done several things, so you'll have to tell us which book is your favorite.
Well, I've got If He's So Great, Why Do I Feel So Bad? Recognizing and Overcoming Subtle Abuse.
Okay, why is that one your favorite?
Well, I tried to sort of bridge the gap between women who are not feeling right in their relationships, but don't know that they're actually experiencing psychological abuse. And this is something that is very near and dear to my heart because so many women end up feeling poorly in their relationships and actually suffer from mental illness, addictions, all kinds of heartbreaking things as a result of an emotionally or psychologically abusive relationship, and yet they don't necessarily even know that that's what's happening to them. So the goal of the book was to sort of help women who are in fact being psychologically abused but don't know they are. And it's not just for women. These same principles apply to everyone, but the book was written specifically for women.
Well, absolutely. So let's say there's a woman listening and she's like, oh, I don't know if is it really bad? Is it just me? Are all relationships hard? I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, what should I change? All those things that come in people's head, right? So
Yeah.
what advice do you have for her?
So my advice is to really educate yourself on what the warning signs are of a psychologically abusive relationship. So actually feeling like you're going crazy is one of the warning signs. So the more we know about the topic, even though it's not a very fun topic, the better able we are to protect ourselves from these types of unhealthy dynamics. So understanding the early warning signs, sort of the personality profile of someone who's abusive, understanding kind of what's going on for yourself, and are these things that are coming up more recently in the relationship? Has this been going on for a long time? Is this something that you experienced in childhood? Are these feelings that are familiar? Those are important questions to be asking.
Well, and let's focus in on, because I know there's so much information out there now, and typically people end up looking up the word narcissism, right? That's kind of the
Yes.
buzzword right now, right? What is a
Yes.
narcissist? And then they see those early warning signs, right? In terms of
Yes.
love bombing or whatnot. And then can start to filter through that. But there's not as much information on what's going on inside of us.
Yes.
Right. That's actually what my book is about. But I would love to, let's focus on that if it's okay with you, because it's hard.
Absolutely.
That's a lot harder to Google.
It is. It is
Right.
exactly right. And it's confusing, when and you're going through this, it's very, very confusing. And yes, the whole narcissism thing is certainly on the forefront for a lot of people, and it actually is often a factor in an abusive relationship, but not always. There are certainly abusive relationships where there isn't a narcissist involved. So anyway, it is definitely important to be paying attention to how you feel on the inside, and if something doesn't feel right to you, it's an indication that things are off and it needs to be addressed.
So you talked about the word confusion, and that's what I've seen, right? That is its own category, right? In healthy relationships, you're not always confused, right? Do they like me?
Right.
Do they not like me? Are they mad at me? What I do today? What's wrong? Right?
Yeah.
So thinking about confusion, is and that's where the term gaslighting comes in for your
Yes.
ladies, right? And why don't you explain a bit about what gaslighting is and why it leaves women confused?
Sure. So gaslighting is a really important concept to understand, especially when we're dealing with psychological abuse, because what happens is that the person who is gaslighting the other person, they do certain things that make the person feel like they're going crazy.
Mhm.
And these are typically very covert tactics. They're not obvious about them, they're not direct about them, but it leaves the other person feeling like they're going crazy. So an example of this would be, and actually this is one that I've heard quite a bit, one partner will hide the other person's keys.
I knew you were going to say the keys example. Yes, that is so easy. Yes. Okay, great. Tell us about the gaslighting of the keys.
So the person feels like they're losing their mind, they're losing their memory, right? Because they cannot seem to ever find their keys. Meanwhile, their partner sits back and says, yeah, I'm worried about you, or, I'm not sure what's wrong with you, that you're so disorganized, that type of thing. And so it creates a lot of insecurity and confusion for the person who's actually being gaslighted. But the whole thing is actually a part of a bigger issue.
Well, because they could play the hero too, right? Like, well, here, I can always find your keys. If you ever left me.
Yes.
Right? How could you live without me? You'd never make it on your own.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that absolutely is a common factor.
And if you're a good, kind, loving, giving person, you would never hide someone's keys on purpose to make them feel like they could not live without you.
Exactly.
So it's not stupidity that, women get into these situations, and men, I have had lovely male friends who have been in the exact same situation. Reverse. Yeah. But it's not stupidity. It's hard to imagine that anyone would do this to someone they said they cared about, right?
Exactly. And that's the thing is most of us assume that other people are going to think the way that we do, feel the way that we do, behave the way that we do. And so if we don't do those things, it's hard to even imagine that someone else would do those things to us. So for most people, it doesn't even, cross their mind that something else could be going on when some of these symptoms start to appear. So, and meanwhile, of course, your confidence starts to lower. So does your, self-esteem, and, you begin to question yourself and think that there's something wrong with you. But absolutely, these are very concerning warning signs, because in a healthy relationship, both people want to support one another. Both people want their partner to be happy. All of those things that we know need to exist for a relationship to be healthy.
And you talked about, that questioning yourself. And so often when women or men say, oh, am I the toxic one? Right? What advice would you have to her? Because usually what I see is like, well, if you're questioning yourself that you might be the toxic one, it's pretty unlikely that you're the problem here because you're able to self-reflect.
Exactly. Well, that is so true. That's a good little quick test. You're the one that's the one who takes on the responsibility in the relationship, and often more than your fair share of responsibility in the relationship, then you are likely not the toxic person in the relationship. So usually what we see is sort of a real imbalance there, and where one person takes on more than their fair share of responsibility in the relationship, is highly empathetic, is working really hard to carry the relationship or support their partner, and their partner is not doing those things in return. So, and often is doing the opposite of those things.
So one person's doing all the work of the relationship and the other person's reaping the reward. Is that?
Very often, yes.
Yeah.
See that a lot. So if somebody's asking if they are the toxic one in the person, if they're empathetic, if they are trying really hard to understand their partner, and they are
and change and get better,
to change, exactly, give their partner what they need. Those are very, very healthy, loving things to do in a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So to recap, because people who have been in this situation are probably confused as it is, right? So we talked about confusion, feeling like someone's taking away your ability to trust in yourself, creating confusing situations around that person, less self-esteem, loss of confidence, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what are some other feelings that if someone's like, oh, is my relationship really toxic, or am I really in an abusive relationship? And I hardly ever use the A word. I call it the A word, with abuse, because it is so hard to grasp
It is
sometimes.
hard to grasp. And so what I usually say is if it's easier to think of like a bullying relationship where you've got a bully, then sometimes that's easier for people to digest,
Yeah.
especially when the more overt signs of abuse are not occurring. It's very hard for people to recognize that, what they're experiencing is in fact abusive.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as some other things to be looking out for, it's really common for someone who's in a psychologically abusive relationship or any type of abusive relationship, or toxic relationship, if you feel more comfortable, to be trying to manage their partner's reactions. And
Great example. Yes. Very
so
important.
So whether it's fear that comes up or dread or worry that their partner is going to be angry, most people in these unhealthy relationships are very good at learning how to manage their partner's reaction, and they've sort of fine-tuned it to where they may believe that they're the only one who can handle their partner, they're the only one who understands their partner, that type of thing. And that's an important thing to identify if you're doing in your relationship, because again, in a healthy relationship, you should not fear your partner's reaction or worry about your partner's reaction or be scared of your partner's reaction.
So yeah, I'm trying to think, like with my husband now, if he's upstairs working, I don't let my daughter play piano, right? Like that's a pretty and but because I know someone hearing this, it's like, no, well, everyone's supposed to watch out for the person. So when he's upstairs working and she's playing piano or there's kids in the house, it's like, oh no, like you need to be quiet and be respectful
Yes.
of what's happening,
Ab-
and that is
That's
that.
very, very different. So that's just
Yes.
acknowledging your partner's experience. That's a part of empathy, right?
Yes.
Okay, my husband needs to work, he needs peace and quiet. That's just part of a normal healthy relationship consideration. This is very different in that this is when you're afraid of your partner's reaction.
Mhm.
You've seen your partner overreact or even punish you if you don't
Yeah.
do what your partner wants. So this is really about how it feels to you internally, and usually it's fear, and
Mhm.
concern over not knowing how your partner will respond, if your partner will get angry, blow up, punish you in some way, silent treatment, that type of thing.
And it's a pattern, right? Like the example I was trying to think of in my my healthy relationship now, it's like that's the only example I can come up with, right? That it's like, okay, so it's maybe like 2% out of 100% of our relationship is, hey, when he's working, I need to keep the house quiet. Like
Yeah,
that's it. It's not, am I going to make dinner the right way? Am I going to wear the right thing? Am I going to say the wrong thing in front of his friends? Am I going to get the
exactly.
wrong groceries?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So these patterns are so important to pay attention to,
Mm-hmm.
because in an unhealthy relationship, there are patterns that show up over and over and over again. And typically the mistreatment escalates over time. So,
Yeah, yeah. And thinking of, because we all have bad days. So the example I use is there's a difference between a dog who bites you once and a dog who bites you daily,
yes, yes.
right?
Absolutely. And that can be something that is very confusing to someone who's in a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship, because the abusive episodes typically don't occur all the time. And there's usually a lot of good in between these abusive episodes or the overtly abusive episode. And so that can be very misleading and very confusing to a lot of people. But if it's cyclical, and if
Yes.
you notice that there's sort of this pattern to the behavior, and overall you feel worse and worse about yourself in the relationship, these are things to be paying attention to.
Well, and if they get in trouble, like you finally put your foot down or something, and they try to, or they do something that they feel like maybe over the line, maybe they broke your favorite vase when they got mad, right? And then if they're making promises and acting good at that point, that's part of the cycle. That's not, oh, they've changed. They know
Exactly.
they crossed a line and they're trying to get you back in their good graces.
Exactly. So if you look at an abusive, a sort of a typical abusive cycle, there's the sort of overt outburst, whether it's physical or verbal.
Mhm.
There's something that happens, right? That's the abusive episode, and then you get the honeymoon phase where the person
Right.
is you back and everything is great, and that's exactly right. That's not real change. That's a manipulation to try to keep you engaged in the relationship. And then there typically things go along for a while and they're fine, and then you sort of get this tension that escalates in the relationship. And a lot of victims of abuse sort of report that they notice, they can feel it in their body, or they can read their partner. They know when things are starting to escalate into another sort of overtly abusive episode. And some people even will try to pick a fight earlier on, hoping
Hmm.
that buildup won't be so bad, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
actual outburst won't be quite so intense, which is heartbreaking. And that's another way of sort of managing the person's reaction.
And that's exhausting. Like we talked about the confusion and the self-doubt, but the exhaustion of this type of relationship
Absolutely.
is
Absolutely.
completely abnormal,
It
right?
is normal, and it can lead to actual illness, physical,
Absolutely.
because when your body is in that heightened stressed response on an ongoing basis, it's extremely detrimental to one's overall well-being.
And I've seen it in nervous system complications, right? Because your nervous system is so heightened. And then cancer, right? Is that the two main
Yeah.
things you've seen?
Yes, well, any type of inflammatory response, and what that leads to, autoimmune issues, and yes, cancer. I mean, some of this is just um, heartbreaking to
Mm-hmm.
see as people sort of internalize all of this over a long period of time, what it does to them.
And I think the internalization is important too, because you have one partner, it, not in the most covert stages, but many times it's one partner's allowed to be angry. One person's allowed to be mad. One person's allowed to say, you're not meeting their needs. And then your job is to internalize everything rather than being allowed to ask for your needs to be met or for you to be angry, right?
Absolutely. So that is definitely a sign of an unhealthy, unbalanced relationship. If there doesn't seem to be any space for you to have an emotional response, or when you do,
Great language. Mm-hmm.
yeah, when you do express your feelings, you're penalized for that, or it makes things worse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't have the sense that your partner is trying to understand you or trying to make things better between the two of you. So there becomes less and less room for you to be you, and that even can show up in your interests, getting together with friends and family, and becoming more isolated. This can take many different forms.
I want to go back. There are two phrases you said that were just so good. Less and less space for you to be you,
Mhm.
right? And then in a healthy relationship, being allowed for there to be a space for you to have an emotional reaction,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
those two phrases alone, right? And it's just so beautiful, right? Because in a healthy relationship, you get to have a bad day sometimes.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
Yes.
you get to be you all the time,
Yes. Exactly.
right? Hmm.
Exactly.
That's such so well said. I know you're a fabulous writer and whatnot, but those were such lovely words, such lovely words. So, what are some other signs that you see or notice in women who are in toxic relationships, and women noticing things about themselves?
So I would say that fear is definitely an
Uh-huh.
important feeling to pay attention to. That seems to be sort of an overarching emotion. So
Mm-hmm.
be something I would say to pay attention to, your level of fear or worry around your partner. And then
Fear
the
of what you say, fear of their reaction, fear of
yeah,
not doing the right thing, fear of the
disappoint
wrong.
them, or if they withhold love,
Uh-huh.
to go away. Um, yes, all of the above. That
Okay.
is very, very common. And then I would say if you notice that you just don't feel good about yourself around your partner, you feel like you're being criticized a lot, or your partner is disapproving and it makes you feel bad about yourself, this is something else to be paying attention to. If you feel smothered, like
Mm-hmm.
you can't get a break, or when you do try to take space for yourself or invest in other things, your partner gets angry with you or jealous or threatened in some way, these are also things to be paying attention to for sure.
So, not being allowed to have a life outside of your partner's expectations for you, maybe them not wanting you to be close friends with people they may see as like dangerous, who like may
Yeah.
point out their behavior to you. Yeah, and I heard a story. You were talking about being smothered, and I heard a story, and it was so sad because it was supposed to be this success story of someone who's like made their marriage work and it lasted for all these years, and it was so great because at one point she had an affair, but he took her back in, and come to find out, fast forward 20 years later, she wasn't allowed to pick out her own shoes, and she wasn't allowed to go to the grocery store by herself, and she wasn't allowed to talk to her children on the phone without him being present.
Oh no.
So do we see why she had an affair? I mean, not excusing affairs
Right.
necessarily, but it's like, golly, what?
There was more to the story.
So much more to this story. And, it's like, oh, that's a success story because they didn't get a divorce.
Right. Right.
Right. So what advice if it was like, a female and she's measuring her only success is like either this relationship works out or I'm a failure? What advice would you have for her?
Well, I would say to really examine what the definition of success is, because certainly if you are being hurt in your relationship, whether that's physically or emotionally, that's not success.
Right.
And so if you're going to look at, does this relationship support me and feel good to me, or is this a relationship that diminishes me and tears me down? Those are important questions to be asking in terms of, do I want to commit the remaining years of my life to this relationship and to this person? And something that you said made me think of something that's also important for people to identify is, if you feel like your partner is often the victim, right? This is something that is important to pay attention to. If you feel like you're the one that needs to apologize a lot, and that you feel sorry for your partner, or you're afraid of what your partner might do to themselves if you're independent, or decide to leave the relationship, these are things that are warning signs, and so they're not indicative of a healthy relationship.
Well, I think about it as a healthy relationship is like two people beside each other, right? And in a toxic relationship, you have the hero, which is like, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, you can't live without me, blah 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 blah. But then they can flip and play
Yes.
the victim, and that's
Yes.
what's so confusing, right? Because it's like, what? So I should be doing more work of the relationship, or I should be saving them from work because I'm always bad. Like, which one is it? Like,
Yes.
it's so confusing. But if you can start to categorize this victim behavior or hero behavior,
Yes.
I think Lundy Bancroft in his book, I'm sure you're familiar with his work, but
Oh,
he,
work.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, I love him. He was on the podcast as well.
Oh,
Yeah. But within his work, he says it's not Mr. Right, it's Mr. Always Right.
yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Right? Is that how you would describe that hero behavior, like Mr. Always Right, kind of telling you who you should be?
Absolutely. Anytime there's sort of this power differentiation, that's a warning sign that something's not right, because it should be very, very equal in any kind of relationship. And in an unhealthy relationship, the dynamic keeps shifting in order for this person to stay up here and for you to stay down here. And even if they're playing the part of a victim, it's designed to keep you down here feeling
You're
guilty.
always doing the work of the relationship, right?
Exactly.
So in
Exactly.
either circumstance, you're working and they are reaping the benefit,
Yes.
whether it's the
Yeah.
benefit of power or responsibility avoidance,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
When
Such a fun, easy topic. It's so nice we could get together for this lighthearted conversation.
right. Exactly. Well, what's amazing is once you start seeing these patterns and understanding what's going on, it's so liberating, because you begin to understand why you feel so poorly in your relationship, and you can see it with a little bit more clarity and objectivity, which is just so important in terms of, leaving the relationship or equalizing it.
Yeah, yeah. And being really, it's going to be a loaded question. When women are saying, okay, I just need to work harder to equalize the relationship or have better boundaries, where would you tell her to work on it, or to say, enough is enough? Like how would she know which category she should be in, and if the relationship can be equalized or not?
Sure, sure. Well, it really depends on the severity of the abuse. If there's, a history of trauma, that's important. I would say that two big factors, somebody who's unhealthy or abusive or toxic, there's a big spectrum there.
Absolutely.
And so if someone is willing to take responsibility for themselves
Whoa. Willing to take responsibility for their behavior. That
Mhm.
is step one. I want to slow that down and make that like shine the spotlight on that comment. I think that was lovely. What else do you have for us? Because that's hardly ever happens.
Right. Well, that's part of an abusive or unhealthy relationship, right? Is
Yes.
person does not take responsibility for themselves and blames it on you or others. So if we're looking at if a relationship has any hope of changing and being balanced, where someone falls on that spectrum is extremely important. And then the other big piece that I look at is the level of empathy. So if you have a partner who does not have empathy for you, cannot have empathy, will not have empathy for you, where do you go from there? And if you combine that with not taking responsibility, you know, you can't be the only one working in the relationship. I mean, those are just fundamental things that have to exist for a relationship to be healthy and for a relationship to get back on track. So,
Well, and empathy on what, when they behave badly, its effect on you, right?
yeah,
Not situations like, oh, I'm so sorry you lost your keys. Here, I'll always be here for you and save you, and here's your keys.
right. No, that's a manipulation. No, this is
Right.
empathy. This is not even just words that, the person thinks they're supposed to say to you. This is true empathy. I've hurt you and I see that you're suffering, and I want to talk this through or work this through because I don't want to hurt you.
And I want to change my behavior so I don't hurt you again. How can I do that?
Exactly.
Right. I was
And
thinking, yeah, go ahead.
well, I just want to say, it's not uncommon to hear some of these words during a honeymoon phase. So it's important to really focus on the actions too, not just the words, because someone may promise all kinds of things and say the right words. But the question is, are the actions consistent with the words? And are those changes sustainable?
Exactly. It's always about the pattern, right?
Yes.
Always
Yeah.
about the pattern. Can they
Yeah.
sustain good behavior? I'll tell a little sneaky on me and my husband. Or something kind of big happened this week, and it was like he was mad and I was mad, and it was kind of this thing that doesn't have a solution, right? There's a problem in our life that does not have a solution. It can't just be talked out. It's something completely out of our control. That's not between the two of us, like external factors, and someone that we can't just get rid of, right? Like they are a part of our lives. I think it's not my mother-in-law, but I think women will understand it when they talk, it's like, oh, the mother-in-law with the bad boundaries, right? And, we were fussing at each other. And then he came and he said, I'm sorry I got so mad yesterday. And I said, I'm sorry I always have such an emotional reaction to that conversation. The end. And we're done, right?
Yes.
That's healthy dynamics, right? And
exactly. Things are going to come up.
Yes. But well, I kind of put you on the spot. If it's not healthy dynamics, you're like, man, that girl's a mess. But I guess
no. I think that's a beautiful example of
yeah.
that you worked your way through together. There is no solution, but even just knowing that the other person sees us and we're kind of in it together, that goes a long way.
And he apologized for what he did in a sincere way. And I apologize for what I did in a sincere way. We couldn't fix the situation, which is really like, I want this to all be, some things to be different.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I got mad. And I said, I'm sorry I always get because I get spun up about the issue, right? It's like, that feels, you're just like, well, we all have those little things, right? But I did this and I'm sorry. And I did this and I'm sorry. And then it's over. There was no earning back or manipulating behavior to try to make things okay. So it's just that it's done. Okay.
Absolutely.
What do you want for dinner? Right. Oh, that's awesome. Avery, thank you so much. So tell us about your newest adventures. Tell us where people can find more about you and your work.
Oh, thank you. So averyneal.com is a great place. I have articles, up there, and then I'm taking a little bit of a step back from the writing and actually working on my PhD right now. So
congrats.
Finished with that. So anyway,
congrats.
Thank you. So it's been a lifelong dream, and I'm excited to have the opportunity now. So
you should be excited.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Avery, do you have any last words of wisdom? Your one message to the world, right, on this topic? What would your advice be?
So I think I would sort of simplify things and say your feelings are enough. So often we kind of look to, tangible evidence, and we want to be able to prove why we feel the way that we do, or why we need to leave this relationship, or we think that there has to be some huge big blow up in order to leave an unhealthy relationship. And what I'd like to say is just pay attention to how you feel in your relationship, because your feelings are enough, and they are there for a reason, and it's important to listen to them.
Love it. Avery, thank you so much for coming here and helping us on. Oh, you're welcome. We'll have you back again. We'll be like, Dr. Avery Neal. Give it up, people.
That was wonderful.
We can do it. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for helping us on our journey to become toxic person proof.
Thank you. Bye-bye.